Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. I can't tell you what a huge pleasure it is to be here. My name is Javier de Anda, and as was mentioned, I attended Eaglebrook in 1986, from 1986 to 1989. I came here to learn English, amongst other things. Let's get this out of the way. Yes, that is me, the one with the shorts. Now, that picture proves two things. Number one, that I attended Eaglebrook, like I said. Number two, I didn't speak a whole lot of English when I came here. You know how they say, hey, didn't you get the memo? Oh, I got the memo. I had no idea what the memo said. In any case, eventually I think I overcame all that dorkiness, unless you ask my wife. And we are now happily married, and we live in San Diego, California with our two young gals. So I don't really think that I'm one of those people that was born with any kind of a special gift or any kind of a talent. Kind of a normal person. And what I do know is that over the years, I've become what I refer to as a goal junkie. Okay? Now, therefore, I'm here to talk to you about goals. Now, as with every good goal junkie, I try very hard not to talk about limitations, and instead, I talk about dreams. And I try very hard not to focus on obstacles, and instead, I focus on plans. Perhaps most influential towards the successes that I've had in my life, I try not to leave anything to tomorrow that which I can do today. Okay, now the story that I'm here to share with you goes a little bit farther back than 1986. You'd have to go back to Amada's home in Mexico City, my backyard to be precise, on Friday, September 21st, 1979. It was my 6th birthday. I was so excited. I had friends there, presents, family, the whole 9 yards, best day of my life. Now, knowing that I was a pretty competitive kid from a young age, my mother had allowed me to come up with any kind of a game, any kind of a competition to take place during my birthday party. And what I came up with was we were going to jump over chairs. Cuckoo. Chairs. Now, keep in mind, this is before lawsuits were prevalent, and plus whatever happened in Javier's backyard stayed in Javier's backyard. But in any case, what this game consisted of is we would sit down on a chair. We'd get in line, we'd jump over a chair. If you made it, we'd sit down a second chair. If you made it, you went on to the next round, and so on. If you didn't make it, you had one of two things, or possibly both. You had a bruised ego for sure, and then you probably had something else bruised, depending on how you landed. It was brutal. But the competition began, right? And all of my friends, except maybe 3 of the smarter ones who went straight for the cake, we began to jump. And so then, at first there was 12. And that soon became 7. Nobody died, just got disqualified. And then that 7 became 5, and 5 became 3, and 3 became 2. And then there was me. I had won. I was so excited. I remember my mother coming over and saying, Javito, good job, you won. Now go have some cake. I'm just giving you those special effects. She didn't really talk like that. She was speaking Spanish. But before she started putting away these chairs, I remember saying, Mom, wait, please. I want to jump one more chair. To which, as with any reasonable mother would, she replied, Dios mío, are you loco? And in the middle of all this madness, I remember a deep voice emerging from the back of the crowd. It was my grandfather. I remember him saying, the boy wants to jump on another chair. Let him jump on another chair. And so I took that as a green light. I went back as far as my backyard would allow. And the crowd gathered once again, about to witness an epic fail. And I remember looking down at my runway. And no matter what anyone thought, I didn't think, I didn't wonder. I knew I was going to make it over those chairs. And so I closed my eyes, and I visualized myself flying over those chairs and landing free of harm on the other side. I took a deep breath, and I took that very important first step. And then the second, and the next, and the next. I started gaining speed, and those chairs were coming at me so fast. I gave her everything I could, adrenaline running down my body. I took the last step. I leaped. I flew. My grandfather was my hero. Papa, we call him. He was great at many sports, most noticeably at track and field. He was a 2-time Olympian. He had broken every imaginable record in Mexico. He was named the best athlete in Mexico in the first 50 years of the century. Eventually became the president of the Mexican Federation of Athletics, became a Hall of Famer, Amazing man. But most important to this story, that day jumping over those chairs, Papa and I made a connection. I remember him telling me, "Do you want to someday be a world-class athlete?" To which, of course, I said, "Si." And so he took me under his wing, and I began to train. He got me access to the best of coaches, the best of teams, eventually pulled some strings and got me access to train at the Mexican Olympic Training Center, which was an incredible privilege. Everything was amazing. And so I came to Eaglebrook, the track and field here, went back, and eventually my family and I, we moved to San Diego. But don't worry, I stayed in close contact with Papo. Finished high school in California, and eventually made it into the San Diego State University track team. The Barcelona Olympics were just around the corner. Everything was going according to plan. Until that day, a day I will never forget. It was a cold December morning. I was late to a track meet. I got there with barely enough time to warm up and put on my shoes. And so I went to the other side of the track to the start of the 200-meter dash, as I had done so many times before. And I stood there behind those blocks, and I heard that familiar voice. "Competitors, take your marks." So I did as I was told. Relaxed my shoulders. Took a deep breath. Get set. And then that pain, that unimaginable pain, that deep, deep pain in my left hamstring, I had destroyed it. A career-ending injury that, even after months and months of therapy, could never come back from. The fast twitch muscle that was required to be a sprinter was gone, and with that, my dreams to be a track sprinter were gone as well. Now, to make matters worse, a few months later, I was by my papa's bed at a Mexico City hospital as he took his last few breaths. I remember whispering in his ear, "Papa, don't worry. Someday I will be a world-class athlete just like you. I promise." And a few days later, he left us. I was devastated. My running was gone. My papa was gone. My spirit was crushed. I admit it, I had to let time do its thing. But before long, I remember getting up one morning thinking, man, I've invested a whole lot in myself to get me to this point. I can't just let it all go to waste. And plus, now I had a promise that I had to keep. I had to reinvent myself. And so I went back to the drawing board, had to do a little bit of soul searching, eventually found the sport of triathlon. I had everything I needed, everything I could want to. I didn't need to be a fast sprinter. So I went and bought myself a bike, some goggles, running shoes, wetsuit, and began to train, put together a plan. I was very methodical. I was training harder than ever, twice a day in most days. And I began to make progress and have successes. At first, at local races, then at the state level. Before you know it, I was racing in international races once again. And I remember thinking that, looking back at the road that had got me to that point, almost unconsciously, I had been following a certain set of steps that had allowed me to be successful. And I remember thinking that those steps could really apply to anything, any kind of a goal, big or small, and anyone really. And so I documented it. I documented those steps, to be honest, so that my two girls could someday take advantage of them. But tonight, I have the incredible opportunity and the privilege to be able to share those steps with you. Step number 1, you got a goal? Define it. Define it with excruciating detail, so much that you can close your eyes and feel it and taste it, hear it. Okay, now most likely this goal is going to come in the shape of a moment. For me, that moment was the sound of the roaring crowd as I approached the finish line at the huge event, and my muscles with the adrenaline and the sweat coming down the side of my face, almost in slow motion as I crossed the finish line wearing my country's uniform. Right? Now, for some of you, it might have nothing to do with sports. Maybe it's the sight of the tall red curtains and the lights in your face as you walk onto the stage and sit by that grand piano, about to give the concert of your life. For others, maybe something completely different. The smell of the latex gloves that you just put on as you walk towards that operating room table with your staff, patient, the lights, moments before you perform your first open heart surgery. I want you to close your eyes and try to visualize that moment with me. Can you see it? is. Now I want you to do something else. I want you to write down that goal, because you see, research shows that people who write down their goals are 50% more likely to achieve them than people who do not. And keep that piece of paper nearby, because it's going to pull you out of some tough situations when the going gets tough. Okay? Step number 2. Break down the roadmap. It seems so unimaginably hard, so far, so distant, right? To be the owner of that wonderful house at the top of the hill that you've always dreamed of, or to be the president of that company, right? So far away. I believe that no matter what the goal is, no matter how big or small it is, it can be broken down into steps. Let me give you an example. You guys may not have heard of this guy, but there's this guy named Tom Brady. Quite possibly one of the best quarterbacks in the history of the sport. And I'm pretty sure that Tom Brady didn't wake up next to his wife one day and looked at his hand and said, Giselle, wake up. How do I have 5 Super Bowl rings? How did these get here? Right? Before he got 5 rings, Tom Brady had to get 1. And before he did that, he had to get drafted into the NFL, and that didn't come easy. You see, Tom Brady wasn't the first or the second or the third pick at the draft. He was the 199th pick, 6th round of the NFL draft. And before that, he had to have a successful college career, which also didn't come easy. At the University of Minnesota, he was mostly benched for his first 2 years. And before that, he actually had to be noticed by college recruiters, which also didn't come easy. He had to send tapes and letters with his statistics to these coaches for them to take interest in him. And before that, he had to have the grades to be college eligible. And before that, he had to pass that one really hard test. And before that, if you go way back, at some point, little Tom had to learn how to hold a football and throw a decent pass. Any summit, no matter how tall, it's so much easier to conquer if you take it one hill at a time. Step number 3, believe in yourself. It's not enough to define the goal and, the gloves and the piano and all this stuff. You need to believe when you're by yourself at night in front of the mirror, nobody else around, moment of honesty, that person putting on the gloves and sitting by the piano, that person is you. And people will tell you that you cannot do it, and that you're not smart enough, and you're not tall enough, you're not technical enough. Whatever. You have to believe. Let me tell you a little story. I used to tell this story to my girls when they were little. It's kind of a cute story. It's a story about these little frogs that had gathered around a tree. There was a tree climbing competition. And so these frogs had started to climb up a tree, a really tall tree. And the crowd at first was cheering for them, but before long, some of these frogs began to give up, jumped off, or they just thought they were too weak, or they got tired, questioned their motivation, and turned around. And as the number of frogs became fewer and fewer, the crowd began to turn against them, and they began to yell, "You can't do it! It's impossible! You'll never get there!" Over and over again. And all but one frog gave up. And that little frog kept going, no matter what the crowd said, and made it to the top. Eventually came back down, was surrounded by the crowd who asked, "How did you do this? We told you it wasn't possible. We kept screaming at you that you couldn't do it," only to find out that little frog was deaf. Step number 4. Can't tell you how many times people will say, I got to get motivated to go to the gym, or I got to get motivated to get an A on that class, or I got to get motivated to lose weight, or whatever it might be. You see, I believe the opposite is true. I believe that the first day at the gym, it's going to suck. It's going to suck really bad. You're going to hurt. You're going to be sweaty. You're going to be sore the next day. But the second day, the third, the fourth, the fifth day, they're going to start to get easier and easier. And at some point, you're going to see results. And once you see results, you're going to look back at everything that you've done to get you to that point. You're not going to want to have that go to waste. And that is sustainable motivation. Okay? Now, it ain't going to be easy. You're going to have injuries. And you're going to fail tests. And you're going to go to interviews for the job that you really, really want. You're not going to get the job. And you're going to wonder if those people were right all along. You're going to question whether you're good enough to make it. And you're going to want to quit. Do yourself a favor. Get a good night's sleep. Wake up the next morning and go get that piece of paper we talked about. and follow steps 1 through 4. Not because it won't happen again. You will have many adversities along the way, but now you have a system to use to get past anything. Step number 5. Probably the most obvious, right? But to me, the most difficult and the one where most people fail. We've talked about setting your goals and writing them down, and these are all very important things, but we haven't talked about hard work. Oh, you're going to have to work hard. If it was easy, anybody would do it. You're going to have to work really, really hard every day for a long time. So above and beyond all the adversities, there's going to be days where you just don't want to get up early before the sun comes up. And you're not going to want to shoot another free throw because you shot 600 the day before. And you're not going to want to study another hour because you've been studying for 3 weeks straight for that test. And you're going to want to quit. And you're going to wonder if it's all worth it. Again, go back and get that piece of paper. And remember why you started to begin with. Take the first step, second, third, fourth. I remember making it safely onto the other side of those chairs on my birthday. And I remember almost every workout, every victory, every defeat on my way to 27 years later, crossing that finish line at the Triathlon World Championships, wearing my country's uniform. Tonight I invite you to be goal junkies, to set aside limitations and let your dreams be alive. I invite you to not worry about obstacles too much and focus on your plans. Don't leave anything till tomorrow that you can do today. And remember the 5 steps. Define your goal with excruciating detail. Write it down. Break down that roadmap into achievable milestones. Believe in yourself. Be deaf to what anyone says you can and cannot do. Doesn't matter. Step number 4, take the first step and the ever so important next step. And step number 5, no matter what anyone says, no matter how you feel, no matter how hard it is, whether you're hoping to be Teacher of the Year, or you're hoping to be a surgeon someday, or to learn another language, no matter how hard it gets, don't you ever stop pursuing your dreams. And I will see you at the finish line. Thank you very much.